Today we're going to be taking a look at bastion forts, also known as starforts. We'll quickly jump onto the Wikipedia page to see what we can find out about what starforts and bastion forts are. So here it says that the bastion fort, or the tres italiane, a phrase derived from non-French literally meaning Italian outline. They were first seen in the mid-15th century in Italy. Mid-15th century, that is the 1400s, the middle 1400s. Some types, especially when combined with ravelins and other artworks, resemble the related starfort of the same era. So let's take a quick look at some examples of the starforts that are provided here on Wikipedia. This is map of Palmanova in 1593. This is a Venetian defensive system. As you can see, it's quite massive. We have an entire walled city here with some kind of tower in the center. And then we have all these, I believe they are called bastions or batteries. And we have this star shape all around it. This seems to be a moat surrounded by water. The entire city is surrounded by some kind of moat filled with water. And as you can see, the cities are pretty much built out. In 1593, the city of Palmanova seems to be really well developed, if you ask me. Let's take a closer look at this. Do we have anything on the bastion forts? As you can see some cannons facing each other. Doesn't really make sense as to why they would do it that way, because basically they're all in a crossfire. If this one's begin to bombard and this one's begin to bombard, they run a risk of blowing each other up. And I'm still looking for an entrance into this moat other than from the road. I'm not so sure what the source for, where the source of all this water is. I would imagine that if it wasn't flowing, it would quickly become like foul. It will now start, all the life in this water will start decaying, dying and decaying. As you know, if you keep a large amount of water stagnant for a long period of time, it will just start getting foul. So I wonder what source of water this was, where this water came from. All right. Very interesting here. Citadella of Chacavista Arriera. Forgive me for my pronunciation, but I do not speak Spanish. And I believe this is in Spain. Let's quickly take a look at this. Yes, this is in Spain. It's an example of a bastion fort. As you can see, it's pretty massive. Here we have the bastions all around the thing, all around the fort. We have the pointy star-shaped walls. This particular fort seems to be below ground level, like slightly below, a few feet, a few tens of feet maybe. I'm not so sure, but it looks like It's not on ground level, but below ground level here. This is another one, a huge one, a beautiful one. This is Potange fortification, and they say it was restored to its 1742 condition. And this one is in Netherlands. Really massive. And 1742, based on what I know about the technologies available at the time, building something like this would be a massive undertaking. But here on Wikipedia, they say that this here fort was restored to its 1742 condition. We're not going to be delving too much at the moment to these structures, as to the construction of these structures, because that's not our main focus, at least not for the ones that are in Europe. But I just want to give a general idea of what the Starforts looked like. Here we have an old plan of Turda, if I'm not mistaken, Turda from 1861 in Croatia. And this is huge. This is absolutely huge. It's massive. I can't zoom in anymore, but as you can see, there's a structure here. There's huge walls all around this city, all in the shape of some kind of star, if we put it that way, though it's not a star. Yeah. Here we have another one in Naarden, Netherlands, also massive, also beautiful. As you can see, they all have these kind of walls, star-shaped walls, pointy ends, bastions. Let's quickly go on. This is in a plan of Coevorden. It was reconstructed in the early 17th century, that is sometime in the 1600s. And then it's laid out in a radial pattern with polygonal fortifications and extensive outer earthworks, as reconstructed in the early 17th century by Maurice, Prince of Orange. Now it says reconstructed, meaning it had been built and maybe destroyed at some point. And in the early 1700s, which is 1600, 17th century, that is the 16th, sometime in the 1600s, Maurice, Prince of Orange, reconstructed this thing. It's really amazing what they were capable of building in those days. And here again, we have another fortified city, Nove Zamki. I believe that is Newcastle in Slovakia, 1663, drawn in 1680. So this was built in 1663 and it was drawn in 1680, which doesn't also really make sense, because before you can build something like this, you need to draw it out, you need to plan it, you have to have engineering drawings, architectural drawings before you can actually build it. So how did you build it in 1663 and then draw it in 1680, about 17 years later? That doesn't really make that much sense, but let's go on. Here we have Yedikule. It was built in 1458. It's the oldest known star-shaped fortification. 1458. That's also rather interesting, because from what I understand, yes, this was the earliest forts came out of Italy in the mid 15th century. Am I right? Let's quickly bounce back in here to the origins. Right. Bastion fortifications were further developed in the late 15th and early 16th century. So this is late 1400s and early 1500s. And they were primarily in response to the French invasion of the Italian peninsula. And then the design spread out of Italy in the 1530s and 1540s. This is the 16th century. This is almost at the mid 16th century here. This is when the exportations of the design began. But here Yadikula, which is in Turkey, they say let's see. Here we have the history. The urbanization of Yedikule started in the 16th century, which is 1500s, and became a major hub of industrial and agricultural activities. Yedikule walls, also known as Theodosius walls, are also notable as an are also a notable historical artifact. Its tower, Yadikule Fortress, constructed between 408 and 450 AD, and repaired after 740 Istanbul earthquake. In the Ottoman period, Yadikule was known with its gardens, Yadikule Urban Gardens, which was also famous with its cabbages and lettuces, used more than 1500 years. According to the Garanta books of year 1735, there were 344 gardens, including 9 gardens, which is established between right. So the Yadikule walls, which was built in 1458, is the oldest known star-shaped fortification. That's rather interesting. We have the Yadikule Fortress of the Seven Towers and the Golden Gate in Constantinople, Istanbul, as designed by Frau Frescarella in ca 1685. That's pretty interesting right there. We're not going to dive too much into those histories because we are trying to move on to the main topic of this series. Then we have a table of fortification from 1782 in the Cyclopedia. What do we have here? We have some kind of plans of certain sections of the walls. It doesn't say which fortification this is, but it's from a 1728 Cyclopedia. Moving on, we have here another plan of a bastion fortress. You see the A's. The A's are called bastions. B's are half bastions. C's are known as curtains. The D's are known as ravelins. The E here, right here, and here, I believe these are these shapes here. This chevron shape, if I'm not mistaken, is a tenile. The F's, you have an F here. There doesn't seem to be another F. Crownworks, G's here and here. A hornwork, and the H is a moat. Again, it seems that all these starforts, bastion forts, were surrounded by moats filled with water. Very interesting. Right, so we have a plan of Geneva in 1841, and look at this. 1841. This is huge. It's massive. I wonder how long it took to build this thing, how long it took to plan it out, how long it took to design it. But they seem to be able to do a lot in those times. Again, maybe at some later date we might be looking into more detail as to how all these Starforts in Europe were constructed. But we're just going through quickly. We have Olomouc in 1757 in Moravia, today's Czech Republic. And look at this. Again, it's huge, surrounded by water. And here we have the Siege of Malta, capture of Fort St. Elmo. Is this the fort here, or is this the fort here? All right, let's move on. Another Starfort, Venetian Walls of Nicosia, Cyprus. Again, the Venetian walls. The Venetian defensive design is a typical example of Italian Renaissance military architecture that survives to this day. Here we have one of the most famous statues in the world, which is the Statue of Liberty in New York City, and sitting on a Starfort. Fort Wood. Until recently, I never knew that the Statue of Liberty was sitting on a Starfort. But yep, that's what's happening. Wikipedia showing Elmina Castle. Here we have a recent photo of Elmina Castle. It seems to have been taken in December 2010. This is the map of Ghana. Elmina is somewhere here, I believe. Another photo of a recent photo of the castle. You can see it looks rather weathered and old. And here we have Elmina Castle in the blue, the blue Van der Heim Atlas from the 1660s. You can see the castle fully built out with the Dutch flag on top. And then we have a town built right alongside the castle. Alright. Here we have a map, detail of an identified historical map showing parts of the northwestern Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. That is Portuguese or Spanish. Sorry, I think it's Spanish. And again, here we have in 1563, we have a nautical chart by the Portuguese cartographer Lazarus Louis. Very interesting here. 1563, that is, I believe, a little over 80 years after the construction of Elmina, as described by Wikipedia. Sorry about that. The image here is loading a little slowly. Right, so we see a drawing of Mina. I believe this is Mina. I'm not too sure. See the written Mina down here. And we have this castle-like structure, which really, it looks more of like a children's drawing, if you ask me. For some reason, this is how they depicted Elmina at the time. That's 1563, about 80 years after the construction, the alleged construction of the Elmina Castle. And here again we have from 1572, which is about 90 years. Another childlike drawing. I don't understand why the drawings were so primitive. We have the town here. Looks like wooden buildings. Very interesting. And here from 1704, that's about 200 plus years. Am I correct there? Yeah, about less than 300 years. Yeah, 200 plus years since the construction of Elmina. And here we can see a much more detailed drawing. Much more detailed drawing. Castel St. George de Mina. Beautiful structure. You can see some interesting ornamentation. This looks like a much more well detailed drawing of Elmina Castle from 1704. Let's see what else I got. Here's a more recent photo. And this is Elmina during the castle rule. This looks like a photograph. Here's a photograph. I wonder where this photograph, what the date for this photograph. Let's see if we can find that. Or the source of the photograph. You might be able to track it down. This is from 1871. Netherlands, Fort de Mina, Ghana. Interesting. Right, so these are the images that have been provided to us by Wikipedia. And let's see if we can find some more. The main topic for today, which is Elmina Castle. Now, Elmina Castle was erected by the Portuguese in 1482 as Castelo de São Jorge da Mina, which translates to St. George of the Mine Castle. Also known as Castelo de Mina or simply Mina or Freitora de Mina in present-day Elmina, Ghana, formerly the Gold Coast. It was the first trading post built on the Gulf of Guinea and the oldest European building in existence south of the Sahara. So here we can see the date of erection or construction to be 1482, which is the late 15th century, right? So Castello the Salhora de Mina, or Elmina Castle as it is known today, was built in 1482, which is again interesting. But let's move on for a little bit. Let's read some more. It was first established as a trade settlement. The castle later became one of the most important stops on the route of the Atlantic slave trade. The Dutch seized the fort from the Portuguese in 1637 after an unsuccessful attempt in 1596, which is the late 16th century, and took over all of the Portuguese Gold Coast in 1642. All right, that's a little bit of history. Here we have the pre-Portuguese history, but we'll just hold off on going into that for now. However, let's move on with the arrival of the Portuguese. Let's see when the Portuguese first arrived. The Portuguese first reached what became known as Gold Coast in 1471. Prince Henry, the navigator, first sent ships to explore the African coast in 1418. So between 1418 and 1471, the Portuguese were exploring the African coast and finally reached the Gold Coast in 1471. The Gold Coast had several motives for voyaging south. They were attracted by rumors of fertile African lands that were rich in gold and ivory. They also sought a southern route to India so as to circumvent Arab traders and establish direct trade with Asia. In line with the strong religious sentiments of the time, another focus of the Portuguese was Christian proselytism. They also sought to form an alliance with the legendary John Presta, who was believed to be the leader of a great Christian nation somewhere far from Europe. Now, they say these motives prompted the Portuguese to develop the Guinea trade. They made gradual progress down the African coast, each voyage reaching a point further along the last. After 50 years of coastal exploration, the Portuguese reached Elmina in 1471 during the reign of King Alfonso V. Because Portuguese royalty had lost interest in African exploration as a result of meager returns, the Guinea trade was put under the oversight of the Portuguese trader Firmão Gomes. No picture of this guy. He was a Portuguese merchant explorer from Lisbon, possibly the son of Tristão Gomes de Brito. Upon reaching present-day Elmina, Gomes discovered a thriving gold trade already established among the natives and visiting Arab and Berber traders. He established his own trading post. It became known to the Portuguese as Amina, or the mine, because of the gold that could be found there. So interesting, they find an ongoing gold trade on the coast of Guinea. Let's call it Guinea. And they decided to call it a mine. That's an interesting name. So, construction of the castle. Let's see. Trade between Elmina and Portugal grew throughout the decade following the establishment of the trading post under Gomes. In 1481, the recently crowned John Joao II decided to build a fort on the coast in order to ensure the protection of this trade, which was once again held as a royal monopoly. King John sent all the materials needed to build the fort on 10 caravels and 2 transport ships. The supplies, which included everything from heavy foundation stones to roof tiles, were sent in pre-fitted form, along with provisions for 600 men. Under the command of Diogo de Azambuja, the fleet set sail on 12 December 1482 and arrived at Elmina in a village called of Two Parts. A little over a month later, on 19 January 1982, some historians note that Christopher Columbus was among those who make the voyage to the Gold Coast with this fleet. That's interesting. So here what they are saying is that King John sent all the materials, all of the materials needed to build the fort on 10 caravels. We'll take a look at what a caravel is later on. Let's continue with this. And 2 transport ships, right? So they sent all the materials to build the fort in 1481, the ending of 1481, in December of 1481. Now, the supplies, which included everything from heavy foundation stones to roof tiles, were sent in pre-fitted form along with provisions for 600 men. Now imagine this, transporting all the materials that were needed to build a fort on 10 caravels and 2 transport ships, from foundation stones to roof tiles, in pre-fitted form, meaning prefabricated, in 1482. This is what the mainstream narrative claims, which is amazing. I wonder if we could do that today. But let's continue. Upon arrival, Azambuja contacted a Portuguese trader who had lived in Elmina for some time to arrange and interpret an official meeting with the local chief, Kwame Ansa. Kwame Ansa interpreted from the Portuguese Caramansa. Azambuja told the chief of the great advantages in building a fort, including protection from the very powerful King of Portugal. During the meeting, Azambuja and the chief, Kwame Ansa, both participated in a massive peace ritual that included a feast, musicians, and many participants, both Portuguese and native. Chief Kwame Ansa, while accepting Azambuja as he had any other Portuguese trader who arrived on his coast, was wary of a permanent settlement. However, with firm plans already in place, the Portuguese would not be deterred. After offering gifts, making promises, and hinting at the consequences of non-compliance, the Portuguese received Kwame Ansa's reluctant agreement. So here, basically, what they are saying is the chief at the time of Elmina was wary of having the Portuguese build a fort on their coast. And Azambuja was trying to convince the chief of the great advantages of building a fort in Elmina, which included the protection of a very powerful king of Portugal. Right? Now, Chief Kwame Ansa, while he was accepting of Azambuja, as he did accept other Portuguese traders, was not happy with them building a permanent settlement. But the Portuguese, having made firm plans, were not deterred. After offering gifts, they now threatened the chief, Kwame Ansa, of the consequences of non-compliance. And Kwame Ansa's reluctant agreement. So the chief reluctantly later agreed after being threatened. Now, let's continue. Where the construction began the next morning. So basically, they are saying they arrived on 19 January 82. They had a festival, a massive peace ritual, and the next morning, construction began. Now, the chief's reluctance was proved to be well-founded. In order to build a fort in the most defensible position on the peninsula, the Portuguese had to demolish the homes of some of the villagers. who consented only after they had been compensated. The Portuguese tried to quarry a nearby rock that the people of Elmina, who were animists, believed to be the home of the god of the nearby river Benya. Prior to the demolition of the quarry homes, Azambuja sent a Portuguese crew member, John Bernardes, with gifts to deliver to Chief Kwame Nansa and the villagers. Azambuja sent brass basins, shawls, and other gifts in hopes of winning the goodwill of the villagers so they would not be upset during the demolition of their homes and sacred rocks. However, John Bernardes did not deliver the gifts until after construction began, by which the villagers became upset upon witnessing the demolition without forewarning or compensation. In response to this, the people forged an attack that resulted in several Portuguese deaths. Finally, an understanding was reached. Continued opposition led to Portuguese burn the local village in retaliation. Even in this tense atmosphere, the first story of the tower was completed only after 20 days. This was the result of having brought so much prefabricated building materials. The remainder of the fort and accompanying church were completed soon afterwards, despite resistance. Now here is a very interesting narrative here that we have going on. Basically, they're saying that when the construction began the next morning, the locals were angered by the Portuguese demolishing their homes in order to build the fort. Now, they were also angered by the fact that the Portuguese tried to quarry a nearby rock that the people of Elmina, who were animists, believed to be the home of the god of the nearby river Benya. That's very interesting because, if the chief had agreed to Azambuja building a fort, with the Portuguese building a fort on the peninsula, I would think that they would have agreed on the site for the castle. But there's no mention of that here. There's only mention of the fact that when they started construction the next morning, the Portuguese began demolishing homes of some of the villagers. And then also they tried to quarry a nearby rock where the people of Elmina had a deity of some sort. So I would imagine that they would have agreed on the site. And then if the Portuguese had suggested the site upon which their god or their deity was located, the locals would not have agreed to it. The chief would not have agreed to it, made it clear that that is the site for that's a sacred site, so they will not allow them to build a fort there. But it seems that part was omitted. They did not agree on any side. They only agreed to permit the settlement to be built, the fort to be built. And it says here that the local people attacked the Portuguese and killed several of them. Finally, an understanding was reached. There was continued opposition, and the Portuguese burnt the entire village in retaliation. But even in this tense atmosphere, they were able to finish the first story of the tower in 20 days, and the remainder of the fort was completed soon afterwards. And it is this speedy construction is attributed to the fact that the alleged fact that most of the material was prefabricated, as stated here. Right here. Heavy foundation stones and roof tiles were sent in pre-fitted form. So we are supposed to believe that in the year 1571, apologies, 1481, which is the late 15th century, the Portuguese had prefabricated a fort, placed it on ships, 10 caravels. This is a caravel, by the way, and 2 transport ships, and shipped that within a month to the coast of Gold Coast, and then within 20 days they were able to finish the first story of the tower, and soon afterwards they completed the entire fort, which is amazing. 20 days to finish the first story of the tower, and then the next there's no other timeline given basically apart from the 20 days, and then they say soon afterwards they completed the entire fort. This is like truly amazing construction methods. So let's take a look at this Elmina castle. So after a little bit of digging, I was able to locate this plan of Elmina, Castel de Mina. This was allegedly made by the Dutch. Now, the Elmina castle was originally constructed by the Portuguese, but later on it was taken over by the Dutch. This is all in the historical narrative. So at some point in the future, after construction, the Dutch took over the Elmina castle and then drew out a plan of the castle. Here we have another image. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at this. Like sorry. Look at this. Here we have the Elmina castle. As you can see, you have the bastions here. Then we have a surrounding wall. And yeah, basically this reminds me of a starfort. This makes me think that this is a starfort because of the different designs, the similarities in design. Right, you can see here the bastion. That's number 7. We have the battery by the constable. Number 5, we have the battery by the corps de garde. This is in Dutch, so forgive me. I'm not fluent, or I'm not a Dutch speaker. We have another battery here. 14 is another battery, the new battery, maybe meaning the new battery. Right, so look at this. This is Elmina, properly laid out, planned out town of Elmina. There's another one. This River Benya. You can see we have like an entry into the port. It looks like an entry into a harbor of some sorts. Right? Completely built out. And this St. Jago, which is on a hill to the right of Elmina Castle, overlooking the castle. This, I believe, was originally built by the Dutch when they were attacking. After they attacked Elmina, after conquering Elmina Castle, they used the hill to attack Elmina Castle, to bombard it. And after they had successfully acquired the fort from the Portuguese, they then built St. Jago on the hill to prevent another kind of similar attack on Elmina. Now that is the mainstream narrative. We'll be taking a closer look at that in the future. But look at this. Look at this. The town of Elmina. This is completely built out and laid out properly as a city, as a town. You would expect a town to be. And this was supposedly built. The first story of the tower was supposedly built within 20 days, and then the remainder of the fort was finished soon afterwards, which is very vague. If you ask me as to the dating of the completion of a fort of this size, yes. And there's also a narrative whereby they say that part of the fort was built at a certain point, and then later when the Dutch took over, they now added certain parts of the forts of the existing fort later on. So yeah, there are these kind of contradictory narratives surrounding the construction of Elmina, which is again the oldest existing European structure in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And then here again we have another map of West Africa with the Iberian Peninsula and Elmina. In here again you can see the difference in the drawing between the first one we viewed and then the second one. So another kind of contradiction. Here we have a quick screenshot of from a Wikipedia page concerning the construction of Elmina Castle by Asambuja, and it says here that in 1481 Diogo was appointed by John II as captain of a fleet consisting of 9 caravels and 2 ships. In the earlier one, I believe they said 10 caravels, with 600 soldiers and 100 masons and carpenters. They were sent along with the necessary stone and other materials to construct a fortress called São Jorge de Mina at the Gulf of Guinea in the Portuguese Gold Coast colony. This became the best known exploit of his long life, that is Diogo Azambuja. They chose a favorable defensive position for the fort, and construction was practically complete after only 20 days, in spite of resistance from the native population. So again, here they are saying that they completed the construction of the fortress in 20 days. With the fortress finished, contacts were established with the local population to establish trade. Diogo de Asambuja sent the fleet back to Lisbon with word that the mission has been successfully accomplished, and he remained behind as captain of the fortress with a force of 60 soldiers. He held this position until 1484. The fortress is now known as Elmina Castle or Elmina Slave Castle. So 1484, that is 2 years after the construction, Diogo Asambuja, I believe, left and returned to Portugal. Again, we have a kind of childish painting of Elmina Castle with a little hut town in there. What else can we see? Okay, let's move on. Here again, we have another map of the world from 1502, the Cantino Planisphere. And here again, we see Elmina Castle in a different shape or form. Very childish drawing again. We have some animals. We have what looks like to be native people. We have a crucifix. And then we have a town of huts on both sides of the castle. Right. So again, that's 1502. That is 20 years or so after the construction of Elmina Castle. Here again, we have another drawing of Elmina Castle, and we have another drawing of Conradsberg. That's St. Jago, which I showed in an earlier plan. As you can see, there is a hill. There's Elmina Castle. There's a British flag, I believe. So the forts were passed between nations at certain points in time. First, it was the Portuguese who built it. Then the Dutch came in, and then later the Dutch sold these fortresses to the British. It's closer to the 1800s, I believe. I'll check that and confirm. And again, we see a built-out town. And this time, you can see some story buildings in the no longer huts, but now what looks like brick or mason buildings. And then Elmina Castle completely built out. I don't have a date for this image. Right here again we have another map showing the Elmina, the plan of Elmina, and then St. Jacobi, which is St. Jaco, right on top of the hill. This is 1647, correct? 1647. It's over 100 years after the original construction of the fort. Here we have another view of Elmina Castle, side elevation. Here we have Elmina again. Look at this, completely built out town surrounding Elmina. I believe that's St. Jago in the background. Fort de Elmina Anglaise, this is English Fort Elmina. So this is in the 1800s somewhere. Again, here we have the fortress of St. George de Mina. And you can see there are different depictions. We keep getting different depictions of what the fort actually looked like. We have some towns and some story building, what looks like a two-story building here. All right. Then we have this old depiction here from 1563. So again, it's a contradicting depictions of the castle, the fort. Here we have the coat of arms of Mina. Right, interesting little image here. Here again we have St. George de Mina. Let's take a you see the town built out. We have ships. I believe this is the Dutch flag. We have St. Jago with the Dutch flag. We have some buildings in the background here as well. We have Elmina, St. Jago, Cape Coast Castle. This is of like a large swath of the coast of Guinea with the different castles. Again, we have a prospect of Elmina, St. Jago. It's really interesting, like how the different depictions we get of this castle. The Dutch ones seem to be more detailed than the rest. But very interesting indeed. Yep, and I believe that's it for now.